Before I get to the message that I will offer you today, a couple of little, as it were, announcements from me. You might recall several weeks ago when we moved here for the first time, we had a few unfinished things done in the church. The pews on this side were not completely reupholstered as they are now. And I mentioned that, it's okay because that's life. It's a process. And the process and, the renovations, as it were, in a sense, it'll only be finished when we get to heaven. And that's really true. Life, the process of life, we're not going to be complete ever until we get to heaven. Well, it's true of the church in a sense. But I kind of point out to you, I think you probably already noticed, that we did have one new addition over the course of this past week. And you'll notice it's right up here in the front, the candles, the vigil candles that I know many people like. And you'll notice that they are real candles, not electric ones. So, you use the lighter to light the candle, and it really burns. And so they're there for your devotional needs, as well as, I put all the devotional statues, the images that are a really important part of our Catholic tradition. Of course, the Sacred Heart of Jesus, St. Joseph is there, St. Anne, the mother of Mary, and Mary as a child, and I think it's St. Martha. I'm not sure who the other statue is. I still haven't yet to, one of these days I'll remember to look it up, find out who that is, unless somebody knows. And then, of course, the relic of St. John the 23rd and St. Michael the Archangel, which is really the second thing. So they're there for your devotional purposes and, part of what makes a Catholic church a Catholic church. So speaking of St. Michael, though, this past week or so, the bishop sent a letter to all of us, to the pastors especially, asking us for a couple of things, given the scandal and how that has just so profoundly affected us. He's asked us to do a few things of prayer, penance, because it really is all of our sin. We're all affected by this. And prayers for reparation, so that there can be healing in our church. He asked us on Saturday, September the 15th, which is really a great day because it's the Feast of Our Lady of Sorrows, from 8 o'clock in the morning until 8 o'clock in the evening, to have a day of Eucharistic adoration. So throughout the course of Saturday the 15th, which is 2 weeks away, whoops, that can't be good. It's okay, he'll survive, Mom, don't worry. Grandma. That's what that room's back there for, isn't that wonderful? And Dad can hear me talk too, if he goes in there. So we'll have Eucharistic adoration. I really encourage you. Saturday, a lot of people don't work on Saturdays. I know some do. I do. But it'll be a great day to come in and a special day for prayers. We'll do a couple of things throughout the course of the day as well. The other thing, there's a couple of things, and we'll get to them another time, but the other thing that the bishop asked us to do, something that maybe some of you who are older remember from days past, and actually when I did it last night, he asked us to start at the weekend of the 15th and 16th, but I said, no, I'm doing it now. After Mass last, oh, Father, that was great. I just remember that as a kid, and I love it that you're doing that. So the bishop asked us to recite, after the final blessing, the prayer to St. Michael. So we'll be doing that, starting that this weekend. And I know different people have different versions of it that they use and different words in there that we use, so that we are all on the same page and saying the same words. It'll be up there on the screens for you to see, so we can all be on the same page. Okay? So those are really the two things that I wanted to mention before I got into my message, which starts off like this. Any football fans? Anybody watch football? Watch football on TV? Anybody? Come on, raise your hands. I don't. I can't raise my hands on that one. I don't watch football. I could care less. What about the other two big ones? Baseball and basketball? Watch baseball and basketball on TV? Yeah. Of course, I can raise my hand on this one. Any golf fans out there? Golf? Yeah, I like to watch golf. I don't get to watch it as much as I would like to, but I do like to watch golf. Let me ask you this. Besides being sports, obviously, and sports that use a type of ball, football, basketball, baseball, golf ball, what do these all have in common? Think about it. What do these sports, these four sports, all have in common? They all have different ways of playing the game. They're all obviously different games, different numbers of people involved in different ways. Well, let me put it to you this way. What if you imagine you were to give a group of kids a football, and they have no idea of the game. We live in Europe, and of course, Europeans, they don't know anything about American football. Here's a football, go play. Go out and have no idea how the game is played. What would happen? Have fun, kids. It would probably become quickly an exercise in futility. In fact, it might even be comical. But it also might, quickly become boring. The kids would say, I can't bounce this ball. It doesn't work, And it's possible some might even get into a fight and get injured because they don't know what they're doing. Rather, and here's the thing that all these games have in common. They all have a very clearly defined set of rules, right? All of them do. There's a very defined way that the games are played. The rules regulate all aspects of the game. And when the rules are followed, the players will ultimately have a much deeper sense of satisfaction and enjoyment about what they do, right? You agree with that? Yeah, and who wants a cheater? Who likes a cheater? And we really get uptight when people cheat. Not only is it true of sports having this defined set of rules, but it's also true of many other aspects of our lives, especially those things that we honor in life. And the things that we honor, the reason why that is because we surround those things that we honor with laws, with rules, with laws, in order to protect the integrity of that thing. How much integrity would football have if nobody followed the rules, right? If you don't play by the rules, you'll be penalized. If you don't play by the rules, you might even be ostracized. How many professional athletes do we know that have been ostracized? They've been kicked out of the game. What's the fellow, the baseball guy from the Cardinals? Is it the Cardinals? He cheated. He used the game to his advantage, and he's been lifetime banned. Keeps trying to get back in. It's not going to happen. You've been banned. You're ostracized. You're out. You're done. But if you really love the game, you're going to follow the rules fully, completely. If you truly love the game, also, those rules will come naturally. Maybe eventually you'll have to, over time, you got to learn the rules and get to know them. But, that's one of the things that we teach, young kids how to play the game. We teach them the rules. You can do this, you can't do that. That's the rule. Okay, no problem. And at the same time, you quickly realize, though, that those rules really are not burdensome. Oh, I can do that. And they provide a greater sense of freedom and enjoyment of the game. Well, it's true in sports, it's true of many aspects of our lives, but it's also true of a life of faith. If we truly honor God, then we have to understand that there are laws that God has given to us by which we must abide. It's just the way things are. And we abide by those rules to protect the life that He has so generously given us. Our lives as individuals, as a community. We follow those rules because that's how we honor God. In truth, following God's rules then bring a very profound sense of freedom and peace and joy that you can't get anyplace else. Try as you might, you can't do it. And that's where the second reading from St. James, this is what he says: humbly welcome the word that has been planted in you. James is speaking exactly of the way God takes His law and places it on our hearts. I was thinking about this earlier this morning. I didn't say it last night at Mass because I reflected on it this morning, was praying about it. It's like planting a seed. Well, in order to plant a seed, for it to grow, you have to till the soil and prepare it and get it ready, fertilize it and all that kind of thing. What happens to a seed that you plant in hard clay? Nothing. So God plants His laws on our hearts he prepares us to receive his law. He prepares us to live his life. And it then comes naturally once we've learned it. It comes natural to follow God's plan for our lives. It's planted in us. It's internalized to a degree that, well, we no longer really have to think about what's right. We just know this is what I got to do. This is what God wants of me. Not as if it's an external burden imposed upon us. Because that's exactly the lives of the saints. That's what they did. And it's exactly the opposite of what our contemporary culture, the world in which we live, teaches us to do, which says, don't just forsake the law. Don't bother with those rules. You don't need them. They're a waste of time. Go play the game of life without any rules and have fun. Well, look at sports. What's going to happen? All kinds of problems are going to ensue. Scandals. And maybe even death. With that understanding of law in mind and the importance of it, we turn to the gospel now and realize that there's even something more going on with Jesus and the way he understands law and rules. Because when the scribes and Pharisees complained to Jesus about the fact that his disciples are not following the law, following the rules, you can almost hear Jesus, please. You can almost hear him say that as he says, this people honors me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. He's revealing the dark side of law, legalism, negativity, a plain old kind of fussiness. You got to do this, you got to do that, do this, do that. And if you don't do this, you don't do that, you're not really the right kind of person. Now, that's not to say, kids, wash your hands before dinner, okay? You got to do that. You got to make your bed, too. And you got to wash the pots and pans and the dishes, because that's just gross if you don't. Why do those things? Not because it's God's law. It just makes sense. And besides, especially for kids, it's good discipline. It's good practice. Because when you get older and you have to follow the real laws, it's a whole lot easier. When you send kids out to play, speaking of kids, when I was a kid, your friends would be over at the house and be doing all kinds of goofy stuff, and mom would get tired of it and say, go out and play. I don't think we do that anymore. Parents, do you do that anymore? You're not allowed to send the kids out to play, because God forbid something might happen to them. But I was a kid. Go out and play. And we go out and play, and we make up all kinds of games. We do all kinds of crazy stuff, games that we would play. And you can't do this, and we got the boundaries here. But what would happen with those games in time was the rules would become so complex. Now, you can't touch this, and you can't go there, that you'd need a whole slew of referees and lawyers to figure them all out. The rules would become extremely complex and burdensome, and the game would no longer be any fun. Everybody would give up and go home. You see, the burden of complexity undermines the life the law is meant to protect. Let me say that again. The burden of complexity undermines the life the law is meant to protect. And that's what the Pharisees and the scribes were doing. They were just making the law so complex that it was like, I can't live this life. Human tradition was brought up to the level of divine law. And that's not what Jesus calls us to. That's not what Jesus is asking. He came to fulfill the law, not to make it a burden. What happens when kids are sent out and allowed to make up their own rules? That's not fair. Yeah, remember that? Remember saying that when you were a kid? I do. Somebody would say it. That's not fair. And it would ensue with a fight, yelling at one another, pushing and shoving, then fists. You know what that's called when adults do those kind of things. All-out war, right? But, when the rules are established and they're just and they're sensible and they're planted in the heart, well, they come naturally. And there is a peace, a freedom, a joy. Considering all of that, and that understanding of law and rules and what Jesus offers us, I'd like you to consider for a moment the events of these last couple of weeks and months even. This scandal that some have called the greatest scandal that the church throughout its entire history will endure, because there have been many others. But this is the greatest, some would say. Consider that for a moment. Consider also the process that we as a parish community have gone through over the past year and a half, the process that has brought us into this new and beautiful church. Consider that. And look at those things now through the lens of this understanding of law. Now ask this question. What would happen, what will happen to the church if we do not have this kind of appreciation of the law as Jesus teaches it? What will happen? In 1969, Joseph Ratzinger, you've probably heard that name before. Does it sound familiar? I know that name. Where did I hear that name before? Pope Benedict XVI. Okay? So Joseph Ratzinger, long before he was Pope in 1969, did a radio broadcast talking about the church, and in his concluding remarks, this is what he said. It seems certain to me that the church is facing very hard times. Now, this is 1969 that he's reading, or that he wrote this, said this. The church is facing very hard times. The real crisis has scarcely begun, and from the crisis of today, the church of tomorrow will emerge. She will become small, and will have to start afresh, more or less, from the beginning. He goes on to talk about that a little bit more, and in my mind, what he's talking about is exactly what we are witness to. Many people leaving the church for a variety of reasons, but sadly, for the wrong reasons. And ultimately, many people have cut and run because of the burden of the law. And that law really is the burden that comes from sin, their own personal sin, the sins of others, and even the corporate sin of the church. Because don't forget, folks, it's you and I that are the church. We're the church. That corporate sin. Ratzinger believes that there will be fewer priests to serve. Don't we see that? 1969, remember, he said this. And therefore, the church will have to discover new forms of ministry. And isn't that what we're trying to do here and now? And a smaller church will make bigger demands of her members. But the church will find, in her essence, the conviction of faith. A faith that's planted within the hearts of her members. Ratzinger goes on to say that when the trial of this sifting is past, a great power will flow from a more spiritualized and simplified church. And that, my friends, is something that I believe in. Because it's worth fighting for, something not worth running away from. And then finally, the would-be pope says this. They will discover the little flock of believers as something wholly new. They will discover it as a hope that is meant for them, an answer for which they have always been searching in secret. How do we do this? How do we make this happen? St. James tells us Listen to what he says. Be doers of the word, and not hearers only, deluding yourselves. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: the care of orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained by the world.